We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hi, welcome to today's episode of Voices of Unitarian Universalism, also known as the VUU or the VUU, depending on how long you've been watching. I'm Aisha Hauser, and I am in Seattle, Washington. My pronouns are she, her. Today, we are joined by Reverend Sarah Skochko, who is a hospital chaplain in Austin, Texas. She is also Ukrainian-American, and she and I bonded when we first met a few years ago because we both grew up in New Jersey. So New Jersey representing. I'm going to send it over to our regular hosts before we bring Sarah on. Michael, how are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Michael Tino from Peekskill, New York, on the other side of the Hudson from the Great Garden State. I'm doing okay. It is a gray, rainy day. The earth is soaking up the rain, and the flowers will use it to bloom. And so I'm trying to ignore the fact that the low pressure system coming through means my hands don't work the way they want to. Just let that go. Let that go. It's good to be here. Good morning, Kiana Danae. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I am well. I am here in Michigan. I have a lot of fears about what we call false spring. There's no snow on the ground, but that means nothing because I could wake up tomorrow with snow again. I decided to tempt fate and put the salt downstairs. Let me be clear. I left the bucket upstairs, but I took the bag downstairs. So I'm trusting and I'm also leery because it's, we like the snow around here and it's still March. So, but today it's supposed to be closer to 70. the sun will be out, and that brings me a lot of joy to be able to be in the sun. I want to hear about the weather in Egg Harbor, DC.
My God, for the one time I don't make noise when I'm supposed to. Usually I'm making noise when I'm not supposed to. Anyway, yeah, hey, good morning. It's, I have, Michael's weather, which is kind of rainy and crappy and gross. But like, the rain is soaking into the yard. I've got daffodils that are out there doing whatever it is daffodils do, and crocuses and that kind of stuff. And the only thing that is on my mind these days is that my house was on the market for 6 days and I accepted an offer, and I don't have to march anybody else through my house again for a while. So huzzah. But aside from that, yeah, life is, chugging along, doing what it does in March. And as for snow, Kiana, when I lived in New England, I developed a policy that I refuse to shovel anything that falls after St. Patrick's Day, because Mother Nature put her down. She'd take her up. It's going to melt in 3 days anyway. I'm not doing it. So good on you and your salt, but I just stay in the house when that stuff happens. I'm going to hand it back to Aisha, who can lead us, or at the very least, let me stop rambling.
Please tell everyone about your shirt, which is one of my favorite shirts. So just
this is my
everyone, and because I need to get that shirt.
This is my Shenanigator shirt, and it says "A person who instigates shenanigans," and it was given to me by a dear friend who is at the Ann Arbor congregation, where Kiana is. My friend Kathy McLean sent me this. Allegedly anonymously, but I am like sneaky and I find out stuff. So, but yes, it is one of my favorites.
And
so
that term could have been coined to describe you, DC.
It could have, but it existed before I knew about it. So, and it seems appropriate for St. Patrick's Day. So here we are.
There you go.
I'm going to say my bag of salt is still on the front porch. Like, I do not have the faith that you do.
No. You can throw salt. I just don't shovel. I just don't shovel.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, I throw salt all day long, but
I think my shoveling, if I had to ask my mail delivery person if I shoveled, they would tell me no. So the shovel just lived by the front door in case of a real emergency. But the salt was my trick. It was just, yeah. I'm not a good homeowner. Let's just be honest about that. According to the mail delivery people. I want to come back around to Sarah, though, because Sarah, we do this really great section right now before we get into the meat of everything as people are getting in the door. To do roundup. What good stuff do you know that is happening in the UU world that you want to share? Come on in.
I feel kind of out of the loop, but I don't even know what to say. As always, when there's big things going on in the world, it's worth it to check in with the UUSC and what they're doing.
And please say what that is. Explain the UUSC, Sarah.
So the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee dates back to World War II, and it's our affiliate organization that rounds up the efforts of all of our UU congregations for not just social justice, but with a particular focus on serving refugees and displaced persons, which is very relevant right now.
And what have you, because I actually haven't, I will admit I have not at all even looked at the UUSC website. What do you know that they are doing, or maybe what you would like to see folks do in terms of what's happening in Ukraine?
Yeah, so I was just talking to them last week. So the UUSC already has ongoing relationships with organizations around the world, but right now in Europe, that aid refugees. Of course, the Syrian refugee crisis has not yet ended, right? That's ongoing. And in particular, because we have siblings of faith in Transylvania, in Hungary, right? The UUSC works with organizations there. One in particular, I know right now is working on helping people with legal issues, crossing borders, getting visas. And that's not something that we can arrange to happen overnight, but those conversations are ongoing. The UUSC has been doing this work for a long time.
Yeah, shout out to the UUSC. They would be great VUU guests. I'm sure we've had them over the years. I say that probably. I don't
You know what? I think I'd love to. I want to get into Sarah's stuff, but also I just want to say out loud, the UUSC has existed before this moment in Ukraine, and it's going to exist after. So just know that there's communities who contiguously need help. The work didn't start with Ukraine; it cannot stop with Ukraine. And if it's work that you feel tied to, work that you can find a way to connect through the UUSC. There's many fights happening on many fronts in many different communities, and it's okay if your sense of awareness just arrived because of the Ukraine, but if you allow it to stop and hold you there, that's a little bit of that's not the work I want to do. I want us to keep going for collective liberation, not situational liberation. So having said that,
yes,
I'd love to know more about the situation in Ukraine and the way that you want to frame it, Sarah. Like, I'm not a historian. I'm not a person who knows a lot about politics. I'm a person who goes, I think people are suffering and that's not okay. So that's the frame that I hold up to this situation. So maybe you can add, excuse me, texture to that.
Sure. When I think of, being a Unitarian Universalist, I think of many things through our UU lens. And I think it's important right now for Unitarian Universalists to know that the invasion of Ukraine is very much an attack on democracy and freedom. And when we consider our religious values and what we want for human beings worldwide to be able to realize liberation, freedom, self-determination, right? That is very much under attack. That's one reason why I think UU should care. I also want to say that it's not possible to care about everything happening in the world all at the same time, and compassion fatigue is real. And you don't have to be an expert in Eastern European history or the history of Ukraine to care. I guess I'll leave that at that, right? I live in Texas right now. We've got a lot going on down here in terms of things Unitarian Universalists can and should care about in our own country and in our own state. What a mess Texas is right now. Thank goodness I have fantastic colleagues down here who are doing amazing work on trans rights and trans liberation, which is very much at risk. So Ukraine, I'm not even sure where to start. I think I wish Unitarian Universalists knew that the history between Ukraine and Russia is a very long one and predates the existence of what we now know of as Ukraine, like the borders where they are now. And that this conflict very much has an ethnic dimension. I think that has past a lot of Americans who, especially white American liberals who are very focused on color lines in terms of conflict, right? Ethnicity is not just about race. Ukraine is a multiracial society. There are Turkic people, there are Black Ukrainians also. But the ethnic component of this is that historically for hundreds of years, Russians have often seen Ukrainians as a kind of lesser or worse version of Russians, right? So both Slavic peoples, there has been genocide in the past in Ukraine in the 1930s as a result of this ethnic tension, of the denial of the Ukrainian ethnic identity, the belief that the language, the Ukrainian language, is just a worse, broken version of Russian. And I like to tell Americans, you can imagine in our country, the way indigenous peoples were stripped of their languages, forbidden to speak it, right? The way indigenous children were forced into schools to learn the language of the colonizer. That's been ongoing in Ukraine for hundreds of years. So when I've heard from a number of, white American liberals who see this war in Ukraine as a war between just two equal white nations, which erases the multiracial, multi-ethnic character of Ukraine, as something they should just work out between themselves. because they don't see that this is an imperial colonizer attempting to eradicate an entire ethnicity. And for Unitarian Universalists, right, that takes on a very different importance and meaning to us because of what we value and what we care about. Right? This is not like France versus Germany. This is something Russia has done before. I don't think it really hit American news last summer when Putin released an essay that was called, I forget the Russian title, but it was called something like On the Historic Oneness or Brotherhood of the Ukrainian and Russian People, which sounds nice, right? We love brotherhood, we love togetherness. What that really means is that Ukrainians don't exist, right? That's not a valid ethnic identity. And for Americans, when we think back on the old melting pot paradigm, how sinister it is, right, to look back on the many decades of minorities being told, it's fine, your identity doesn't matter, it's not important, you don't need that. There's a very sinister dimension to that. So the prelude for at least Eastern Europeans to this has always been an ethnic one. And that's something I wish Americans knew. Do you have any questions about that? That's a lot of...
Wow, Sarah, I appreciate that so much. And I think that the part about, because here's what came up for me as you were talking about the white liberal reaction. There's an element of wanting to, here's what it is. It's not diving deep enough and understanding. So to your point, this is about imperialism and colonization and white supremacy with the nuclear power. I mean, the United States is too, yes, it's happening here as well. And it's important that, the erasure part of it, as Kiana Dene said, people are hurting and, liberation is not limited to one group, right? And so, the whitewash, I'm going to, for a second, leave Ukraine because this happened to me when I first became a UU, and people would say to me, because I grew up Muslim, and they'd say, oh, can you come talk about how peaceful Islam is? And I'm like, I was threatened with death, so I'm never going to say that. That it was not my personal experience, and I don't necessarily believe that. But there's the nuance is lost on sometimes white liberals who want to make things just super, let's brush over what the intricacies are. So I think there is an element of, these are, white people with white people, and that just completely erases exactly the horror that has been perpetrated by people in power. So thank you for that. How are you in terms of, do you have family there? How are you managing? Because you're right, compassion fatigue. And I know you especially have been just a fierce, upfront in Unitarian Universalism in terms of anti-oppression work, anti-racism work. So I know what you've been holding, and I deeply appreciate your ministry. How have you been supported? How are you feeling right now? How are you in touch with folks in Ukraine?
Yeah. So luckily my family is all here. I don't have family that I'm in touch with, distant relatives, but we don't, we're not close. I do have friends in Ukraine, and I'm a member of the Austin Ukrainian community here. And of course, many of those people still have relatives back in Ukraine that they're trying to bring over. We're trying to find out information if they're alive, right? So for Ukrainians and Ukrainian-Americans in the diaspora, it's been a tough 3 weeks. At one point, my partner gave me a deadline in the evening when I had to be off of Twitter, right? Because it's not healthy. And this is partially why, you spoke to the complexity of the situation and the nuance. This is partially why I started out by saying, you don't have to be an expert in everything. You don't have to be an expert in Eastern European history to care. But I think it is important to know when our perspective is limited, right? I know I'm an American and I don't have family there, so I'm one step removed. And I keep that in mind, right? When I feel myself being emotionally drawn into this. Yes. DC, you have a question.
Yes, I have a question. We've been Facebook. I don't know that we've ever actually met. Have we? We might have. who the hell knows, right? Time is memory is whatever. But but we've been Facebook friends for a good long while, and I've been watching in the past couple years as you have started learning Ukrainian language, and I've watched how that has deepened your understanding and appreciation of the culture. And I can only imagine, I would say you're at some sort of, like, I'm going to guess, like beginning to middle sort of skill level with Ukrainian language. And I'm wondering, I can't help but think how that must have really intensified your understanding and your feelings and your and everything happening over there, because there's so much happening, and it feels to me like you've got the decoder ring that lets you see so much more of it than the rest of us can. I just sort of, can you speak to what that journey has been like?
Yes. So I'm not a strong or especially competent Ukrainian speaker a year and a half into my studies. I chose to study Ukrainian. I should say this. My family was mostly Russian speaking as a result of Russian colonization. So my grandmother, my uncles were born in Donetsk, which has now been occupied since 2014. And when that happened, our whole family was like, well, here we go again, just like the past 100 years. So the decision to move away from speaking Russian to Ukrainian, it was a political one, and also a matter of heritage and pride and reclaiming what was taken, even in generations past. I will say, I do have friends in Ukraine, in Sumy in particular, which is a very hard hit city. And I'm in touch with them, and I follow a lot of Ukrainian media, and being able to read what Ukrainians say in Ukrainian on Twitter has been a very different experience. Especially the memes. Ukraine has really won the meme war. I think there's a lesson here in how isolated Russia has been, how they've deprived themselves of humor and joy and just the culture of the internet. Right. So Ukrainian memes are amazing. I've learned a lot of curse words in the past 3 weeks just from that. Yes, there are all kinds of ways to tell Russian soldiers where they should be going and what they should be doing with themselves. Um, but one thing that okay, so
Just so you're aware, it is totally okay to say fuck here.
oh, great.
I just realized, like, hey, Russian ship, go fuck yourself. Like we have a bingo card, and so far Aisha is behind the curve this morning. So, but you can go ahead and say those things here. So please tell us about the signs, because that was absolutely hysterically funny.
Yeah, I will say that Americans seem to be taking more joy from the memes, and Ukrainians, the memes have tended to be somewhat more sullen. There's a very gallows humor sense to this, right? Because people are actually dying. But a Russian warship captured 13 defenders of a small island, Ukrainian soldiers, and this curse word is the same in Ukrainian and Russian. So this battleship said, basically, we're going to obliterate you, give up the island, right? We'll surrender. And the audio was released. There was a little conversation between the soldiers, who said, I cried when I heard this. They said, this is it. So they knew there was a high likelihood they would die. Right? They said, this is it. What should we say? And one of them got back on the radio and said, Ruski kорабль, иди нахуй, which is Russian warship, go fuck yourself. And I'll say that this has not only has this become a rallying cry in Ukraine, this has become so entrenched. People are putting up billboards with variations of it. So Hoi is I can curse. Hoi is a cock or a dick. ed is the verb to go, na is a preposition. So it's basically go get dicked. Or na can also be like the way you go. So you can, the manner in which you go, so you can go by dicking, right? So this is
This is
why,
so much fun.
this is why it translates to road signs, okay?
Yeah.
So this is the double entendre. It's not just go fuck yourself. When the road signs set, you see like this sequentially, it'll be like, you know, how do you get there? Do you get there by highway, by freeway, by railway? So it'll say, you know, go fuck yourself, idi nahoy, but the other meaning is go by dick. To the right, again by dick. And then below that, it'll say back to Russia by way of dick, right? And but the other meaning is by fucking yourselves. Yes.
This is so awesome.
And it's an amazing resistance. You know,
Yes.
I mean, if what you can do to resist these imperial colonizing armies is put up a road sign, then it's pretty courageous to put up a road sign in the face of columns of Russian tanks surrounding your cities, bombing your water
Yes.
supplies, and
Go fuck yourself.
Right. And the practical side of that is Russia was so badly prepared for this war that many of those columns of tanks don't have either GPS or appropriate maps. So literally there are videos of tanks stopping villagers and saying, which way is Kyiv? And the villagers saying, go fuck yourself. Yeah, right. And so people have been taking down road signs to prevent the invasion from moving further. And it's working. So Americans laugh at this, right? You've probably seen memes and videos of Russian farmers dragging away tanks. The tanks run out of fuel. And a farmer comes out with this like beat up old tractor, hooks it up and just drags it off into a field like our tank now, right? Such that the Russian army is now possibly like the biggest purveyor of Ukraine's military equipment.
Can I come on?
And
So I love that we're laughing, and I don't want to stop that, to be honest, because I needed this joy in my life for a moment. I needed a touch of joy. But I just find it so interesting that one of the ways, like in 1930 and 1940, when these same kind of wars were happening, we didn't have the same kind of communication. We didn't have the same kind of anything that we have now. And so it's just interesting that we're watching a war and not just hearing about it on the news at 6 o'clock. If we can find a radio to stand in front of, that we're seeing it happen in real time. I wonder how that impact of being in war and like videoing it, what does that do for you? Like, what is the psychological impact of that? What does it mean to have somebody actually say, I want you to participate in your own genocide? Could you tell me how I can get to where I'm trying to harm these people?
Right.
And I want you to participate, and I want you to be a willing participant in helping me. Like, I don't think we've ever had a frame like this, right? Like we didn't have war with, I want to say Venmo, but y'all, that's not the system. And it's not, what is the little computer, Snapchat, or, what are those millennial social media tools?
yeah. So I wanted to say
TikTok. That's what it's called, TikTok.
Yeah, I wanted to say where I was going with that is, Americans laugh at these memes and these videos, which are really, I never thought that Americans would be exposed to this much Ukrainian language and culture. And I didn't expect it would happen this way. But, we can laugh at these memes. But what I see on the Ukrainian side is that Russia is now bombing farming equipment. And because of the spread of these memes, and there have been security lapses because of people publishing videos, on Twitter, on Facebook. And that is very bad, right? So back in the 1930s, I mentioned the genocide. It's called the Holodomor, when the Soviet Union basically took all of the grain and meat in Ukraine, and 25% of the population starved. And that was intentional. And I was on the phone with my dad when we were talking about all these videos we're seeing of farmers in their wheat fields now, almost 100 years later, removing the tanks that 100 years ago would have been there to take their food and kill them. And to see the military equipment disappearing into the wheat, right, our wheat, was very emotional for us. There were not those videos in 1932, right? Yeah, everyone in Ukraine basically has an iPhone now. What's unsettling to me is the degree of repression in Russia, to where people are not seeing. There's an incredible amount of denial in Russia right now about the realities of this war. So a large percentage of Russians either believe, or they say they believe, which there are a lot of reasons for that, that Russia has not attacked Ukraine, or that if they have not attacked civilians. Now, we, of course, in the West, are seeing videos of horrific war crimes now, right? Of maternity hospitals, schools being bombed. Just yesterday, my gosh, DC, you had asked about the language aspect. The largest shelter in Mariupol was bombed by Russia. And I don't know if you saw, there were something like 1,000 civilians, mostly women and children, sheltering there. And the Ukrainians had written on the asphalt outside of this theater in Russian, not in Ukrainian, in huge words that could be seen from space, the word for kids, dite, children, right? And they bombed it anyway. And 50 years ago, we would not have known about this. We would have heard from Russia that there were insurgents hiding there or something, right? Or it was secretly a military base. Well, someone with an iPhone is out there streaming, and we can see that that's not true, right? So there's this kind of instant verifiability. Yes.
I imagine you saw the Russian woman, the journalist who stood behind
Yes.
the Russian state, right? No, and she wrote in English, wrote "No war," and then wrote in Russian. I don't read Russian, obviously, but there isn't. I mean, I think I appreciate your point, Sarah, to say. I think there's Russians. I think know that their leader is out of control. I really do, and I think there's an element of being subdued. But I'm not. I think most Russians do know what's going on and are afraid. Like, what do they? There's an element of being beaten down and fearful, because I do know there are some reports of Russian mothers like, what's happening? Like, why is my child going to war? Like, why? And so I think I wonder. I think there are protests in Russia. Like, so I don't think that there's
despite them being illegal.
Right.
Despite them being illegal. And so I think there's more resistance in Russia than maybe is. Anyway, that's.
So Aisha, I used to think that. I thought surely, and this is why sanctions are a really tricky question, especially for Unitarian Universalists, because who's being harmed by them, right? Yeah. It's ordinary people.
Yeah.
But the thinking was that sanctions would make ordinary people aware of what their government was not telling them, right? If they go to the bank and swipe their ATM card and it's not working, they're going to have questions. Unfortunately, a ton of Ukrainians and Russians have relatives in one or the other place. And Ukrainians are almost all reporting that their relatives literally do not believe them. So when you think about America right now, we have ostensibly a free media. All the information you could possibly want is there. And 40% of this country still believes the last election was stolen. So, right, when you take that into consideration, the fact that the media in Russia is not free, the implications are not good. So you're right. So mothers are asking questions now. You've probably heard that Russian conscripts are not supposed to be at war. So conscripts are people who are either serving a mandatory service or they've been sentenced to service, right? As part of their, prison term. They're not supposed to be sent into battle zones. And their parents are very aware that they have disappeared. Right. It appears that Russia sent conscripts ahead first who were untrained. And this is like an old Russian tactic to make the Ukrainians waste their ammunition, killing the least valuable soldiers. So the official death toll that Russia has released to their people, the last time I checked, was something around 500. The Ukrainians, I've seen estimates of between 8,000 and 12,000 dead Russian soldiers. These are kids. These are 19-year-old kids, right? which is absolutely heartbreaking to me. They have no business being there, and for what, right? And in some cases where people are realizing something is wrong is where a village battalion has gone missing. So if all the parents in the village, right, they know that there's like 150 kids from that village and none of them have written back, right? That's when people start noticing. And I expect that level of awareness. You know, you can't hide the fact that someone is dead forever.
To your earlier point, those mothers might say something, but like, we've seen communities of color saying how dangerous the COVID pandemic was in the United States, and people 3 states over not believing that it existed. So,
Me on. As you guys are talking and you started to come back to like this America, I can name almost all the little Black boys who have died. Their parents have started some kind of political work. So you have Tamar Rice's mom who stepped into action and started a foundation, and some other parents and mothers. And so I just want to, and as a mama, I just want to call out, like, we don't know how to send our kids off to war. We don't, it's not okay. Like, the mama part of me is like feeling really like alert, right? Like, just this sense of awareness of like what it means to do that, right? So the same fear I have to send my child out to get lemonade and Skittles and to come back to our house safe is the same fear that somebody in Ukraine has to send their child to the wheat field to see if there's food. I'm making a weird analogy, but I work with me here, peeps. It's a universal mothering and a universal awareness of what we're asking of our children every day, and it's hard and that's scary. And I want to say that out loud.
So you've probably heard that. Yeah, go ahead.
So I am a minister, and I have been watching and observing and paying attention and learning from Sarah for these many months. And I know that you're about to have a baby in like the next 20 minutes or so. So I'm just thinking like that's its own soup of hormone-y, like chaos. But I'm also like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And like, because this is extra special, like tender time for you. And there's this part of me that wants to make sure that like your spouse, like your partner, who's like, no more Twitter after 5 o'clock, right? Like, but wants to do what I can to keep you safe, or know that somebody's keeping you safe.
Yeah. Well, thank you, DC. My mom called me the other day to tell me, don't watch the news today, because it won't be good for the baby. And it was news about the maternity hospital. But, as a chaplain, I'll say, I had an uncle who was killed in a car accident. And for weeks afterwards at the hospital where I worked then, every car accident was tough. And this goes for any of us. Whatever we have going on in our own lives, right, stands to be the thing that touches us or triggers us the most. And I'm comfortable sitting in the deep well of sadness and human compassion. There's something about that that's a blessing. That every tragedy or thing that's special to us in our own lives deepens our compassion in a way that can help us relate to others and connect with others. Where that becomes unhealthy, right, can be hard to say. I will say, when the maternity hospital was bombed, I think a lot of Americans saw the picture of the woman who, she was there because she was in labor, right? She was about to see her baby's face. And you saw the picture of her being carried out on a stretcher, bleeding, and it was obvious something was very wrong. And there were 2 reporters there from the Associated Press. And later they wound up reporting the baby could not be saved. And when she realized this, she screamed at the medics, "Kill me now." And she died 30 minutes later anyway. So at that point, I was like, okay, I went to bed and I just cried for the rest of the night, right? And that was not healthy. But I was like, I need a break. I need to go for a walk. There's compassion fatigue, and then there's like compassion battle damage, right? Where it's like, this is greatly affecting me, and I need to take a break. And I think every person of color in America knows this, has to know this, right? Like when you fire up the internet in the morning, like, what is it going to be today, and can I handle this today?
Kiana Dene,
You're muted, Deanna.
I was trying to be good. Sorry. Can we please, and I'm asking for all of us and for our listening audience, can we just pause and just take a big deep breath together? That's a heavy thing to carry. How do we move into a place of healing? How do we maintain our hearts as we help the global community heal? And how do we fight so many battles on so many fronts? That's the question I guess I want to lay out there. Not that I'm trying to pull away from the Ukrainian conversation, because it's important. But if we're going to keep our whole humanity and be ready when our Ukrainian brothers and sisters need us in a new, different, more tangled way, we have to be ready. So how do we get ready to be loving, supportive, communal partners in healing?
I think this is not specific to Ukraine, is it? Right. How do we move forward from anything that's deeply wounding, not just, physically or emotionally, but the spiritual wounding? There are some things you see in this world that make you question the goodness of humanity, the possibility of liberation or grace, right? How do we not let those things break us, or only be broken enough that we can still do our work as Unitarian Universalists? How do you all do it? It's not like anyone in this room has been free from tragedy or suffering in their lives.
Thank you for that, everyone. I read somewhere that grief is the capacity to hold love. Like we expand our capacity to hold, like the sadness, right? When I was in my early 20s, I discovered, I was raised very Muslim, so I didn't really read about any other religion. I just knew they existed, but I started reading a little bit about Buddhism and the whole accept suffering. And I was like, fuck you, Buddha. Like, what does that mean, accept suffering? We can't just sit back and accept suffering. And now, 31 years later, I think I understand that accepting is not passivity, and it's not, there's something, because otherwise we will be broken. We won't be able to empower ourselves. When I'm mired in, and Tamir Rice was that, when Tamir Rice was murdered, the 12-year-old, my son is about his age, and I remember Tamir and Trayvon, I was gutted. And this had been happening. And Emmett Till, it's not that this hasn't been happening, but it was something about a child just sitting on a swing being murdered. And there was never justice for Tamir. So how do we, one of the things that I learned is, or I'm still learning, because I still get very angry, I still have to take time out, is accepting that suffering is a part of life. It is a way that I use that for empowerment. It's like, in what ways am I going to name and not only injustice, but that this isn't okay. Like that's why I always talk about not being neutral. Like there's no such thing as neutrality. And so, watching what's happening in Ukraine in real time and the resistance, and, we know about the history of enslaved Africans. There's been resistance since day one in 1619. So there was never this not resistance. And there was resistance among indigenous people to colonization. So there's always been resistance. And there's And so how do we more and more move to centering the resistance? And the thing is, that's existential for us as humans. We are now talking about nuclear powers. There was one psychologist who said Putin might have Parkinson's and might be having like a psychotic break. And so that's, I think, being generous, but there is evil happening, and this is evil now that can destroy humanity. And so the enormity of it is really just, if I sit with it long enough, it can be paralyzing. And so I then turn to, I don't say fuck you, Buddha, anymore, because that's, Buddha maybe had some points to make. But I say, okay, humanity is a puzzle. Humanity, with all the information we have, still chooses evil. There are those among us, and there are still those among us who choose resistance, who choose love, who choose liberation. So that's kind of. Go ahead, Sarah. Yes, please.
So I think the acceptance of suffering does not imply being okay with that suffering, right? We have to accept that there are a lot of people who are dying in Ukraine right now. Are we okay with that? No. There's no outcome to this war that's going to bring back those people or their children, right? Or erase the horrors that they've seen. But it is. It is here. This is now a fact of what we're going forward with. And something that's been immensely frustrating to me, as a Ukrainian-American, has been witnessing white American liberals impose their solutions on this situation, which are generally peace-focused. And the peace of white American liberals, as I'm sure you all know, generally involves the people who are being attacked or who are suffering or who are oppressed just being okay with it, just surrender, just stop fighting back, stop resisting. Right? Yeah, it's
sorry. We need, nonviolent communication or some sort of listening circle.
Or my favorite in liberal UUism is always like, let's have a conversation about it. Let's break down all the words they're using. Let's have a meeting about it.
Right.
Let's form a committee and a task force.
Appropriate in all situations. Let's form a task force. So I've heard a lot of these calls from America about, moving forward peacefully, no war. It's appropriate if you're at a protest against Russia to hold a sign that says no war. Tell the Russians. But if you want to support the Ukrainians, absolutely do not come out to any of our events at your city hall holding a sign that says no war. Who are you talking to? Who are you telling?
Know who you're having a conversation with. Thank you, Sarah, for saying that. So often we are spouting the cliff notes without understanding who the author is, right? Or understanding who our audience is. So we got to be clear about who our audience is. And if you can't name the audience, you got to ask yourself, why are you at that protest? Why are you there? If you don't understand, if you just want to be a body, but don't take the time to hold up a sign or tell people how to get free from their own the constructs of oppression, if you're not even willing to dive in and understand the level of oppression that's happening.
Yes. So there's a lot of Americans right now who, Aisha, you touch on this, are afraid, rightfully so, of nuclear war. It's crossed my mind more than once that Putin might be terminally ill because he appears to be now trying to secure his legacy above all else, including the lives of his own citizens, which is very dangerous and frightening to me. So yeah, it's right to be worried about getting into like nuclear war and not wanting to be involved. But absolutely, under no circumstances should you be telling that to Ukrainians right now, right? Who, let's not let America get involved any further. Don't send any more weapons. Please shut the fuck up. Like, if you're not going to help, don't help. I've seen Unitarian Universalists promoting these peaceful causes, like make sure to donate to Win Without War, a nonprofit here in America that, encourages, nonviolence and promotes peaceful solutions around the world. What the fuck is that going to do for anyone in Sumy right now as tanks are rolling down the street? Ukrainians have been very clear that what they need from the international community is a way to defend themselves against the people who are currently attacking them, right? And I see these tremendous parallels between that and what has happened in America to people of color, right, who have been for, I don't know, the entire history of the country, told that it's not appropriate for them to ever defend themselves, stick up for themselves. Like, it's the worst possible thing you can do to burn down a police station, even if there's no one in it, right? When that is an occupying, colonizing, violent force. It's the worst possible thing to do. Why don't you think of peaceful solutions? Okay, has anyone told the police to think of peaceful solutions? Where are you directing them?
Yes.
And now I see this happening, the same rhetoric being directed to Ukraine, and I just want to slap everybody silly. Like, if you're not going to help, don't help. That's fine.
Of being oppressed is on the shoulders, and the burden of releasing yourself from that oppression is on your shoulders. And you have to do both simultaneously in this way that is really, I never cuss on here. Are you guys ready? It's kind of a mind fuck, right? to be told you, I know,
I'm so proud.
It's really intense to be told you are oppressed. It is your fault you're oppressed, and you have to escape from oppression. And I'm going to tell you how to get unoppressed. What, like, there's no agency in that sentence, right? I'm never going to be the bigger person. I'm going to be the person who's seeking the most justice. That's the bigger move here. And when I'm doing that, you should really be afraid. When I'm seeking more justice than you're willing to give me, that's what being the bigger man is. And so I guess I just want to, as much as we think things are global, there's always a global reach and there's always a local reach. So let's, with our last 9 minutes, what if we dig into what are some things we can be doing on our local ground, we can be doing on our global ground? What are some spiritual tools in our toolkits? I'll lead off with this. There is always ways to help somewhere locally. I don't know. We didn't talk about this, but I need to say this because this is my heart. My heart's on my arm, y'all. If you live in Minneapolis and you are, the Minneapolis Public School Teachers Union is striking right now. You have an opportunity to go help those folks, order pizza, go stand out in protest, babysit kids, be a playground monitor for a mom who just needs a moment. There's tremendous opportunities to help on a very local level as those folks in Minneapolis are trying to find economic and educational stability for their community. That's something you can do that doesn't require you to cross the ocean, but it's right here for you. And then on a personal level, y'all, I'm all about music right now. If there's not a soundtrack playing in my head, I don't even know what I'm doing. So for me, music has become my blessing and my release and my laughter and my joy. And so find something you can do and find some way you can keep yourself sane in doing it. Who wants to go next? I'm volunteering people.
Thank you, Kiana Dene. Yes, locally, what are Black-led organizations doing? What are Indigenous organizations doing? Look up where you are. I would also say connect with a friend that you haven't called in a while. I think relationships are really, really crucial right now. I mean, they always have been. And I think one of the things I've been doing, especially over the past couple of years, is as best I can reaching. I've lived a lot of places. So I know a lot of people, and I don't talk to people all the time, but I really have made an effort to say, I miss you and I'm thinking of you. And it seems little, but it does touch my heart. And I find that people receive it really well and are, heartened. And I feel good. I do it as a selfish thing that I want to connect with people and let them know that they're in my heart and I care about them. Because we need to know we're connected. It's a fallacy that we're disconnected. I mean, and also love does not bring liberation alone. Like this whole please and thank you doesn't bring liberation. So cut that shit out. Like this whole, let's give peace a chance. Like to Sarah's point, let's tell the Russian army and the police to give peace a chance. Why don't go give them lessons in nonviolent communication? Okay, who's next?
Amen. I'll say none of us has to solve this geopolitical situation on our own. I know you feel a lot of pressure sometimes. Sometimes I think it's enough to take care of your family, right? And to make it, to survive, to get through your week. If you want to donate, I would recommend going to a website. I'm sorry, it's an ableist name, but the website is standforukraine.com. They have, you've probably seen a lot of links of places you can donate. Everything on that website's amazing, and it's primarily Ukrainian organizations. Please don't give to American NGOs. I'm sure they do good work here, but the Ukrainians need the money right now. There's very little overhead I think a lot of white Americans, oh my gosh, like to give voice to the voiceless. It is 2022. Everyone has an iPhone. There are very few truly voiceless people unless you refuse to listen to them, right? So Ukrainians have been very clear about the resources on standforukraine.com. They need missiles. If you don't want to donate to for missiles, you can buy medical supplies. That's fine. But that's my last suggestion for the work of the Spirit. If you can't donate, if you can't show up to City Hall, is to listen to people perhaps you haven't listened to before, not just Ukrainians, but people here in the US. It's a good spiritual practice.
I have the luxury of perhaps something that nobody else on this panel has today, and that is I live within a half hour from Sarah's family. What's your mom need? What's your mom need? Like I'm limited as culinary. Like I could bring her heavily boiled Irish food, but if there's something that that might bring her joy, get in touch with me after and I'll make it happen. Because I'm local. Like we realized just a year ago that Sarah's family lives like 30 minutes that way from my house. And so that's actual honest to God Ukrainian Americans I can actually go do something nice for.
I'm going to suggest not an edible arrangement.
No,
if any of you have been friends with Sarah for a while, you know.
Yeah, no, that's bad. That's bad. Oh my God. Oh my God. That was just hysterical.
They're okay. But I will say, there's a huge Ukrainian diaspora in America. Wherever you live, whoever's watching this, if you just look up Ukrainians of your town or your state, there's probably a Facebook group, and you can get linked up to them and do things like support their events. Everyone's always having a dumpling festival. You don't want to miss it, right? You can support your local Ukrainian community in all kinds of ways.
What kind of dumplings? Are they like
Vareniki?
Now it's apparently time for lunch because we just put something into food very quickly.
Like if your local Ukrainian church is having a fundraiser, like they probably know the people who need the funds, right? So like when part of listening is actually responding to the people that you're listening to and doing the things that they ask you to, right? That's the accountability part, right? So
no, when Republicans accidentally get something right. Anyway, wow, I want to, Sarah, I want to give you, we have a couple more minutes left. Is there anything? Thank you. So first of all, I want to shout out to Reverend Sarah Skochko, because last night I asked her to be on The View to talk about Ukraine. And so I just want to honor you for saying yes and making the time for us. And is there anything else that you want to add before we close out our this week's episode?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I was thrilled. Anytime I'll talk about Ukraine. My mentor, the Reverend Lois Van Leer, used to have a sign on the wall of the office that just said, "Give a damn." And I think that's, for us, for Unitarian Universalists, a religious imperative. So I want to thank everyone here and everyone watching for giving a damn as a religious principle. We can't do it all. We can't do it all alone. And sometimes giving a damn is enough.
Am I up? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Sarah, so much. Thank you, Kiana, Danae, DC, Michael. Thank you all. Next week, I believe we have Congregational Life Staff. Jessica York, Director of Congregational Life Staff at the Unitarian Universalist Association. So it will be an amazing show, as today's was. Thank you all so very much. And have a good week, and prayers for Ukraine and all oppressed people on the planet. Blessings. Ciao. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit CLFUU.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.